I'd never mentioned that there were men as dark as this. Wow, look at that nose. He's just like a pig. He's a monster! Hut!
In today's episode, I'm joined by a woman named Lina Wu, who wrote the article, Asian Women Are Not Your Damn Fetish. First off, thank you for joining me, and I want to ask why you decided to write this article.
Okay, so just like a little background, I didn't start dating people until I was 18 because, I had somewhat cliched Asian parents in high school, no dating allowed. And it was, when I started dating, I was a pretty insecure person. Like, I had so many issues, and I tended to find myself orienting more towards men who treated me badly. And the unfortunate reality is the majority of them were white men who did have yellow fever, and I would have a lot of very strange situations with them, and being a naive, insecure 18-year-old, I didn't really know how to stop the situation. I'm actually 21 now. My first ex-boyfriend, he was white. It was a very emotionally abusive relationship, and what happened was he would basically make these very stereotypical assumptions about me because I'm a Chinese woman. For example, he learned Chinese for me, even though I never asked him to. And I speak two languages, Mandarin and French. And it was very strange. And I just had a full year or so of really negative encounters with white men. And noticing the fact that a lot of my East Asian sisters, East Asian brothers, East Asian siblings in general, regardless of if you're binary or not, had a lot of similar situations. And I do think we live in a concerning society that does focus a lot on fetishization and an exoticization of East Asian women. But, in all honesty, we live in a society that is very much obsessed with fetishizing people of color and marginalized identities in general, which is extremely concerning.
Okay. Going a little bit deeper, can you tell me what yellow fever means to you?
I don't really necessarily believe all white men are bad or anything, but yellow fever, it can honestly apply to anyone who isn't, East Asian, but yellow fever is when you tend to find yourself purposefully going for East Asians, and I do think racial preferences are racist, to be honest, because you can't just choose one skin tone or one specific feature and generalize it for a whole group of people and say this is the best or this is the worst. And when it comes to yellow fever, you find yourself orienting more towards East Asians. And I do know, it's possible to just happen to, have a trend of dating a specific race, but when you see them not as people, when you see East Asian women, East Asian men and whatnot, as stereotypes, making assumptions that they're submissive or making assumptions that, East Asian men aren't muscular and attractive, that's yellow fever to me.
Mm-hmm. So how would you handle somebody right now who, let's say you're dating them and you find out that they're attracted to East Asian women? Is that a turnoff for you? What would you do in that situation?
I wouldn't. I've changed a lot over the past couple of years. I don't know if I would say it's a turnoff. It depends on how you treat me. If you still manage to see me as a person and East Asian culture, I'm a bit more open to it. But with my first ex-boyfriend, it was very troubling. He saw me as a complete stereotype, didn't like the fact that I was loud, didn't like the fact that I was opinionated, didn't like the fact that I was a Democrat and beyond. And it's possible to just I do think that inherently, to an extent, that people are biased and ignorant, a little bit at least, and it is possible to not intentionally find yourself being attracted towards a certain group of people, but if you go out of your way to just see them as their skin tone, that's the biggest problem.
Okay. I'm going to go to the other side now, because there's another argument that's being made about yellow fever. And I'll start with your article, because it says that, and you mentioned before, that most of the men that you gravitated towards when you were in college were white guys. Would you say that you had a preference for white men, or if it was conscious or subconscious?
I'll be honest, I did. I had a very conscious negative preference for white men, and I am gay and white women too, because honestly, at 18 to 20, I was at a pretty low point in my life. When I was a child, I honestly, secretly, when I would think of myself, I would see a tall, pretty skinny white girl. and I secretly wanted to be white, and I thought, if I date, white guys, white girls, I did date more men than women, that I would find myself being able to, in a way, assimilate into this ideal image that society has for people like me.
Okay. Do you view, I guess, whiteness in the same way as you did when you were younger?
No.
Okay. What changed?
I love my skin tone. I love being Chinese. I love my culture. When I see myself as me. And it took a lot of thinking and self-growth and a bit of a wake-up. And in all honesty, unfortunately, trauma also contributed to my change of mindset. And I'm not saying like white people are ugly and all of them are bad or something like that, but what I am saying is like we shouldn't hold everyone to like this one specific standard that isn't realistic.
Mm-hmm. So I read a couple of articles on the issue of yellow fever, one from 34th Street Magazine, which is part of like the University of Pennsylvania, and one from NYU Local. And both of them talk about how Asian women are objectified by white men. There's weird things that white men do to Asian women, but they use examples of Asian women dating white men or saying that they have a preference for white men in order to explain how Asian women are being objectified. So my question is, do you think that, generally speaking, Asian women may have a preference for white men, or why not?
I think it's a complicated conversation. So, yes, traditionally and currently, East Asian women, we are, honestly, one of the most sexualized and objectified groups. And a part of it has to do with the fact that internalized racism and misogyny does tend to drag you towards being more attracted to people who don't treat you well. And when you live in a society that says white is, better, the unfortunate reality is you're going to go for white people. Like, not that, there's anything wrong with going for white people, but you might go for bad white people just because of their skin tone. Don't get me wrong, like, I don't hate anyone here, and especially, I do think it has something to do with the fact that people do get affected pretty badly by what they see around them. And when you see what's on TV as, like, the good relationship being, especially with interracial relationships, being, like, an Asian woman with a white guy, you're going to mimic it, unfortunately. And I don't know if it's necessarily a preference or something that, like, really is internalized. So I do think it's complex. And for me, at least, even then or now, I would be wary when I date white men because I had so many encounters with yellow fever because you never really know. I would be wary whenever I date anyone who was an East Asian because most of the time, like, I did find, oftentimes, not that I'm saying like all the time, I did find people who did look at me as just my skin tone. And also another thing is, even though I'm not like saying like all East Asian men are like skinny, awkward, and quiet and like feminine, not that there's anything wrong with being any of those, that is something that is a negative stereotype that has been implemented upon East Asian men. And though, like, even with like my family and like even because I'm Chinese and I would spend a lot of time back in China, it would often be stereotyped that, oh, you don't want to date a Chinese guy. You want to find a tall, handsome white man with muscle. And we would even internalize that racism ourselves too. And so maybe it is a preference. Maybe people do think it's a preference, but the thing is that personally I do believe that's not entirely true, and some of it does have to do with, societal standards being forced upon us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. Asking a question about men of color now. There was a book that I read, well, part of it, called We Wear the Mask, where a Native American guy who's planning to go to Dartmouth, he's playing up his Native American heritage, but he's actually Mexican. And he's got a Chinese girlfriend. When his Chinese girlfriend finds out that he's Mexican, she breaks up with him temporarily, saying that Chinese people don't date Mexicans or blacks. My question is, do you think that Chinese people, like, that statement is true, that Chinese women generally don't date Mexicans or even Hispanics and blacks? Why or why not?
That's a good question. I'm going to be honest, the unfortunate reality is Chinese people are racist. Like, we are a racist group of people. I'm not saying that all of us are, and like personally, I don't, I don't try to be like that. Like the current guy that I'm seeing, who's actually sitting right over there, is Indian, and like we do have a problem with colorism, like any other group of color, and a great statement that I would say that could really apply to East Asians, Chinese people, I guess, in this context, is the fact that we're the people who are, second in this society. We're almost white, but we're not white. We are close to getting to that, glass ceiling, but we're not actually there. And because of that, it's internalized the idea of the model minority. We find ourselves implementing and pushing this hate onto like our fellow brothers, sisters, siblings of color, like Black people, Latinos, and beyond. And it's wrong. It's 100% wrong. And another issue is part of the reason why I would say personally why I think there are Chinese women, Chinese men, blah blah blah, who don't go for darker skinned, fellow siblings of color, is because, as I said before, we mimic what we see. We're told that we can't be with people who are darker skinned. It's the colorism, fair skin is better, which is complete, excuse my language, complete bullshit. Because it should be about what's on the inside. And the unfortunate reality is that racism, it does apply to dating life. And I do agree, there is a lot of unfortunate occurrences of there being racist Chinese women and racist Chinese men, racist Chinese whatever.
Okay.
But that's not okay. And we do need to, emphasize solidarity. And
no, go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. We do. And I think as somebody who is a man of color, half Hispanic, half Black, not Mexican, but Puerto Rican, from my perspective, it feels as though when you may say, okay, I kind of like Asian women, you get put into this mold of like, all right, he has yellow fever, he's fetishizing Asian women, that's not okay, and you get pushed right off to the side by somebody who is an Asian woman who doesn't like Blacks or Hispanics to begin with. So I guess what I'm saying is that when we get to the point where we say, all right, a guy who likes Asian women is a racist and is fetishizing Asian women, and that's not okay, and we write him off the bat, but we don't call out like a Jamie Chung who is in a ton of movies with white men and is a white husband, or a Sarah Jeong who is a Times reporter who said all these nasty things about white men and has dated white men. Like, we don't call out the white fever, but we call out the yellow fever.
We should call out the white fever.
Yeah. Do you agree that there's a white fever out there?
Yeah. I don't know if I would, sorry, that was really loud to anyone who's in the coffee shop, but okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, I'm going to quiet it down a little bit, but I don't know if I would call it white fever, but internalized racism is a huge fucking problem. Sorry, language, but Asians, East Asians specifically, well, it's like I don't know much about being like other types of Asians, but you desire whiteness, and the unfortunate reality is we got a whole lot of hypocrites in our community. I'm not saying everyone's a hypocrite. Plenty of very nice, progressive Chinese girls out there and Chinese guys and whatnot. And I'm going to be honest, even I was a hypocrite when I was 18. Like 19, 20 even. I'm changing every day. I try to be better. The thing is, the reality is everyone's unfortunately a bigot, even if they don't want to admit it a little bit. And we do have a lot of incidents of, there are a lot of Asian women, Asian men, blah, blah. And I guess you could say this applies to other groups of color, but I don't know what that experience is like, so I'm not going to comment on that. Who say that they want like this racially progressive, world and like equality, but then they find themselves excluding other, siblings of color from that narrative. And I agree with that. And the reality is it is internalized racism. That's not okay. But I don't know if I would call it white fever. And we do need to continuously call it out, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with dating a white guy if you want to, but like if you're going to be a racist about it and exclude like other people, yes, there's a problem. And I don't personally, I do think that yellow fever and like things like jungle fever and whatnot, it's complex. I do think it's possible to, once again, unintentionally find yourselves being like sort of into Asian women or sort of into Black women or whatnot. But what's important is if you don't go on a dating app like Bumble or something, and every single time you see like this person and they're not the right skin tone, you swipe left just because of skin tone. That's what's important. Or you don't, refuse to give them another person a chance with his skin tone. But like, what's important is to clarify is that you don't go out of your way just to specifically search for this group of people and to like just see them as a stereotype, like a dragon woman, or as like a stereotype of a black woman or something like that. And to finish off, we do need to call that out, especially in communities of color. We do need to call out the members of our communities who exclude fellow marginalized identities and choose whiteness over us. I agree with that.
I agree with that. I'll just say before I lead to my final question that it's not so much the racial preference that's bothered me. It's that the idea that I can't have a racial preference, but the people that I'm attracted to can have a racial preference. So, yeah, like, okay, you can like white men, that's fine. But if you're going to say that I'm a racist for liking Asian women and then you only date white men, or you complain, or you say that the reason why you don't date black men is because they're uneducated, and then you date an uneducated white guy, then that's when it's,
You're right.
That's where the problem is.
Right.
And that leads to my final question. What do you have to say to people who don't like to see Asian female and white male couples?
That's bullshit. I mean, like, no, the thing is, I personally am still, like, very much for interracial relationships, ethnic relationships. I'm not gonna do, like, I don't see color, I'm racially progressive and all that, but, like, I don't think dating, even though there are bad white guys, but there's bad everything in every group, to be honest, and, like, it is possible to find a good white guy. But, like, I don't think, like, dating a specific group of people makes you any less of your cultural identity. As like, my only problem is, like, for those people, you can have a problem if said Asian woman or said white man is, like, a full-on racist who, like, hates black people or hates whatever, then have a problem. But don't just assume things based off of what you see. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean.
Yeah.